in your opinion, why do you want clients to self-qualify or potential clients to self-qualify?
Because it allows for the 300 to actually make its way through the funnel.
But how is that how is self-qualifying helping you?
Well, I think ultimately it allows them to understand. It basically means that they understand our process ahead of us, engaging in a longer conversation.
So for me, you're saving, I'm a super small business. If I'm spending time qualifying leads and vetting leads, I can't make money doing things that make me money. So it's saving me money and time and effort, resources by allowing clients to self-qualify. But then another thing that's huge for me is I don't have to tell a client that they don't fit my client profile, which is rejection, which I've literally told people that, and they've gotten so upset with me. My money's no good with you.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that. But for them to not feel the shame for whatever reason that they don't fit your profile, whether it's financial, whether it's needs, design, whatever that may be, you're not the bad guy at that point. And you don't have to physically reject someone, which I think is huge from a business perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, just tactically, one of the things that we've tested in the past and plan to re-implement is this conditional questioning form. And ultimately, we found that it was too complicated in the beginning. People weren't even getting into the funnel at all because they were like, I'm confused here. But ultimately, what it is, we built this in Typeform. Actually, is a website you can build conditional forms. And conditional questioning is based on what you answer for the one question will feed you down a certain path on the other side. And we actually built it to the point where as you filled it out, you were taking a path to determine whether or not you were you were qualifying. It wasn't saying, hey, you're qualified, but what it did is essentially based on what you answered, we had a scoring system. So it would score hey, if the budget's $1,000 a foot, scoring is 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
If it's $500 a foot, it's that's probably a 3 or 4, because we just know we can't build that. We would score all the questions, and if they scored say 85 and over, we determined that was a good fit. And what that did is it brought them to, you should schedule a call with us so we can talk about your project. If it wasn't a good fit, but it was close, we would say, it doesn't sound like we are a good fit for this project. Happy to, if you'd like to reach out, you're more than welcome to. But it wasn't a direct, hey, we should talk on the phone. It was just an opportunity where it's if you'd like to further the conversation, here's our contact. And if it wasn't a good fit, hey, sorry, this isn't a good fit for us. But we'd still put them into our email marketing, so we would stay in touch. That right there, I think, is a really important note, because we had a client that 6 years ago reached out to us, and we had a phone conversation, and the phone conversation was high level, what it cost to build with us, and they were like, I'm so sorry, this is way over our budget, appreciate the time. And I never thought anything of it. Those calls happen all the time. 6 years later or 5 years later, that client came back to us and went through some professional changes and could afford to build with us and re-engaged us. And it wasn't until a few months into that process he's like, do you remember when we
realized it was them?
And I was like, of course. No, I was like, truthfully, I don't. And he tried to jog my memory. I'm like, I'm really sorry, I don't remember that. And then a year later, he was more specific about when we talked, and I was like, I actually remember exactly when that was. But the point is we kept in touch. And now, in that case, I don't think it was email marketing. I think he followed us on social media and was watching what we did. But the point is you keep them interested and you continue to educate them in the process, because ultimately that's what, you want them to be educated. And I have this written down in front of me, but the number one people don't build is strictly, risk.
The number one reason people don't build.
The number one reason people don't build is risk, and it's financial, emotional, or time. And, so for us, when we're trying to convert someone, we need to be the least risky option for them. For any, no matter how you cut this, that is how they're determining who they work for.
And risk is relative. It's relative to each client and each experience too. Like risk isn't just financial risk,
No.
right? Like there's a ton of risk involved with every project. So you have to understand what's your client's needs. What type of risk are you talking about? In order to make sure that you're like fitting that client's needs, but also like, how are you going to base everything on this project? Is it timeline?
Right.
Is it design? Is it budget? What's the risk with regard to?
And there's that famous saying, like, you know, quality, price, and time, pick two, you can't have all three. And I've always pushed back. I'm like, you can have all three, you just have to prioritize.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, just because you want budget and time doesn't mean quality goes out the window. It just means like that is a third in priority. So for us, understanding the risk isn't necessarily saying, what are you concerned about? It's listening to them talk about the project. And, and one we're going through right now in pricing is that, you know, client came to us, their budget's $2 million to do this renovation. You know, they're in schematic design with the architect. Architect puts together a very schematic level of drawings. We go through it and we realize that what is, you know, assumed in the design is probably like closer to 2.7, 2.8. And so we put together this high level schematic price, and what we used to do is we used to go back to the client and say, hey, what you're designing so far is actually 2.8 million. And, you know, forever the process like unraveled from it. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, we're being super honest. Like, that's our whole thing. Like, we're transparent, we're honest. Like, that's great, but you got to remember that they're paying you for pre-construction, and we're their advocate, and they communicated that their budget's $2 million. The design is at schematic level, meaning like there's very little information, and we're telling them that right out the gate, you're 800 over. So now they're like, they're spiraling.
This is why we hired you.
Yeah, they're spiraling, and now it's like, now this seems like a huge risk, and it's like, in this case, the house is like partially demoed, and like they bought it and they're paying rent elsewhere. It's like, this seems like a massive risk. So we didn't do that. Now we said, okay, that's where it's trending. We need to go through this and understand what's it going to take to do a project for $2 million. Because there's still enough information where we can help guide that. So we looked at the scope, and we actually worked backwards and said, all right, in order for us to hit that $2 million number, here are the things that we need to consider. And some of them are removing scope, reducing scope, or deferring scope. Meaning there's, you know, oftentimes millwork in rooms that they're like, I actually won't ever use that room. So we can turn that into furniture or do it later. So for us, you know, we basically put together this $2 million option. So now we meet the client, and I say, hey, we're at schematic. This is where we're at. This has been our process so far. We have two things to look at today. We've put together a budget on how we hit your budget of $2 million, and we walk them through that. I said, the second budget we're going to walk through is exactly what is designed with the assumptions that have been communicated, and I want to be upfront, like that is trending $2.8 million. So we have both options, because now it's not, oh my God, this is over budget and we're never going to get there. It's, here's what I can do for what I can afford, but here's what I've been asking for from a design. And ultimately where that conversation ends up is they look at 2 million, 2.8, okay, let's end up here. And that's 2.1 or 2.2.
So for reference, what are like the constraints of this project? New construction.
This is a renovation.
Renovation, how many square feet?
3,200.
Like full gut renovation?
It was originally a full gut, and when prior to the schematic, we said if you're gonna do a full gut based on historic, you're gonna be, this was a 3.2, 3.5 number based on other similar projects. So they said, let's not do that. Let's look at partially gutting it and working within the confines, like not stripping out mechanicals, not redoing all the plumbing and electrical.
So what's like the scope difference between 2.7 and 2.0? What is that?
In this specific example, there's 3 staircases that are on the plans to be torn out and rebuilt. So we recommended not removing them and working within the confines of the existing.
Are they getting relocated?
Nope. One of them for the roof was. So we said, let's not relocate the roof one. And ultimately, it was a nice to have, not a need to have. So don't change the roof access. Now you're not doing roof work or removing the hatch. Don't remove the 2 staircases on the lower levels. Instead, modify the existing. simplify the molding package, because the molding package is super complex and multiple profiles being built up into like heavy molding. Go from 100% custom cabinetry to 100% semi-custom. Now I say that knowing that they'll come back and be like, I'm fine with all semi-custom with the exception of like the kitchen.
Yeah.
We want to do custom there. Great. Like this is how we do the volley. There was masonry repointing on the whole building. It was again, like you probably need to do it, but it was also scope that wasn't part of the original deal, but we are recommending it. So we said, we'll pull that out. You don't actually have to do it now. You could do it anytime, but it is something that you should recommend. So ultimately we gave them the path to get to that $2 million, and they get to look at that and say, all right, I understand the difference between the two. I know I definitely don't want the 2.7. I see the 2 million, but there are a few things in there that I feel like I'm not getting the house I want.
Yeah.
So she actually asked the question, is like, so since I'm not getting what I want, does that just mean it's going to be more than 2 million? I said, no, it means like, I want to see what we're missing out of that 2 million and then see what the difference, that might be a 2.2 number, but then there might be things in the 2 million that you still are okay deferring.
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, we went from all semi-custom to, we don't even need millwork on the third and fourth floor. So then it's like, all right, it's, and ultimately the point of that meeting is, you know, in talking about conversion, is like the point of that meeting is to get them to understand that we are here and we are ultimately able to get them what they're looking for, whether that is the full design or whether that is the intended budget.